The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight, with Pride Month underway, we look at some of the important flashpoints in 2S LGBTQIA history in Ontario. Then, Ontario's Minister of Energy and Mines, Stephen Lecce, speaks to Steve Paikin about his government's electricity plans for the province. That's all ahead on the agenda. Ontario's very first Pride picnic was held at Hanlan's Point on the Toronto Islands in 1971. And since then, the 2S LGBTQIA community has experienced struggle and success on the road to acceptance. From the bathhouse raids of the 1980s to the legalization of same-sex marriage in the 2000s to the addition of gender identity and expression to Ontario's Human Rights Code in the 2010s, here now to talk about the progress made and the challenges that remain, we welcome in the nation's capital, Callie Metler, Executive Director of Capital Pride Ottawa. In Windsor, Ontario, Derek Bizot, Director of Education and Operations at Trans Wellness Ontario. In Kingston, Ontario, Maurice Tomlinson, an activist and consultant with HIV Legal Network. And with us in studio, Sherry DeNovo, retired minister at Trinity St. Paul Centre for Faith, Justice and the Arts, and former NDP MPP for Parkdale High Park. Welcome, Sherry, in our studio.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
And welcome to the three for joining us online. Callie, I'm going to come to you. Your work is ramping up, of course, for the preparation of Ottawa's Pride festivities in August. What can we expect this year?
Yeah, we can expect the festival to be bigger and better than ever. Our audience numbers definitely grow year over year, and we are expecting absolutely no change this year, especially with news coming out of the States. We're looking forward to welcoming more visitors to our festival in our nation's capital. And yeah, really just making this year sparkle for all of those who celebrate Pride.
All right. And Derek, help us understand a little bit about the work that you do. What is Trans Wellness Ontario and sort of the work that you day to day?
So we are a social service agency trying to enhance and sustain the health and wellness through individual services like counseling and peer support and group programming and drop-in events and things like that. And my role in education is really to do the education efforts of going out into the community, of offering education services and consultation services to enhance capacity, to serve and affirm, and to include. And as well as I am a drag queen who fundraises for the organization to help sustain our efforts as an organization that relies on grants and donations. A lot of my work is really just trying to sustain ourselves during this economic hardship that we're all facing.
All right. I have to ask, what is your drag name?
So I am Remedy from the House of Cures.
From House of Cures? Ooh, I like this. Very nice.
Yeah, your friendly neighborhood drag queen.
Okay. Maurice, you wear many hats. We've just learned that, you're a nurse, but, you've always been advocating for gay rights, both in this country and out of this country for a long time. I'm curious, how has your work changed, if at all?
So it's been an interesting journey. I initially started my work with LGBTQ activism in an HIV/AIDS hospice back home in Jamaica. Then when I realized I couldn't do much there because I didn't have any medical training, I then became a lawyer and I started challenging anti-gay laws, which I continue to do across the region with the support of the HIV Legal Network. But my interest has remained healthcare focused. So, we recently heard that the FDA has approved this wonderful twice yearly drug that will prevent HIV in those who are on it. And we have bi-monthly Cabenuva. We have wonderful advances. We're working towards a core, but there's a lot of impediments that remain. Structural, legal, societal impediments that remain for people to access these wonderful innovations. So that's where my work and the work of the HIV Legal Network continues to be. Now I am a nurse. Happy to combine my role both as a lawyer, challenging anti-gay laws, and as a nurse providing care for those who are affected by multiple life-threatening illnesses, including HIV.
All right.
Here.
We are going to obviously talk about some of the successes and challenges, but I want to get a better idea of what Pride was like when you were, in your in your younger days. So Sherry, I'm coming to you. We have a photo. This was 1971. Tell us what we're looking at there. There you are. We've outlined you in a red box there.
I've aged into blonde. I've aged into blonde, yes.
Beautifully.
Yeah, I was 21 with my then girlfriend, and Toronto Gay Action, it was a celebration, the first Pride. And there's a plaque on Hanlon's Point because it was a cruising area way before we started in 1971. So from going back to the 50s and even before, it's always been a queer positive space. But that same summer was the summer of We Demand. So the same group that I was part of, Toronto Gay Action, went to Parliament Hill. It was the first quotes unquote gay demonstration on Parliament Hill, and I was the only woman to sign on to it. First legalized same-sex marriage I was honored to do, and that was 2001 between two women of color. I always try to correct history on that. But I mean, after that, the feds picked it up. So we start things in Ontario. And the rest of the country carries on. It's wonderful.
All right.
Yeah.
With that photo, I want to show another photo. This was 53 years later. You joined Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow at the unveiling of a plaque celebrating queer history right back at Hanlon's Point. Full circle moment. Talk about sort of being the trailblazers in this. But what was it like to be there, but also to know what it was like, 50 plus years before that?
Of course. Well, first of all, it's an honor. And I do wear my collar when I talk about queer things because we know that, fundamentalist religion is behind a lot of the hate. So I like to present that, we're not all like that. But yeah, the plaque is up. But two things. I mean, the first Pride was celebration, which Pride is always and should always be. But it was also demonstration, which Pride was and should always be. So it was both two-pronged, So we celebrated, what we hadn't quite accomplished then, but then we went on to demonstrate for what we needed. Because it was in the same group, same summer, same, continuous kind of action. And I think that's really important to emphasize with Pride now. And you heard, the backlash is real. It's coming. It's here. It's not just in the States. It's, Alberta and Saskatchewan taking away health care from the most vulnerable, most at-risk children. So it's here. It's now. It's everywhere. And so it's really important to keep those two components. Yes, we celebrate what we've accomplished. It's phenomenal. It's a lot. And there are legions of people behind every one of those bills. But, we also have to keep what we've won and progress. We need more, as you heard Maurice talking about. Yeah.
With that, Maurice, I am curious, do you remember your first Pride? What was that like?
Oh, boy. So you want to know my first Pride here in Canada or my first Pride back home? Pride in Jamaica is a little different. I must point that out. So we don't do it as visibly as you do, obviously. It's still illegal to have same-sex intimacy. You can go to prison for 10 years for even holding hands in the privacy of your bedroom. And so we have to do things a little differently. So we organize Pride with a lot of secrecy. You have to go online and register. We vet your email and all of that, and it's a lot of privacy around Pride. Then we go out and do a little public demonstration, which only we know is going to happen. Nobody else, no crowds, no spectacle. Then I come to Canada, and I'm in Toronto Pride, and I was honored to be one of the international Grand Marshals at Capital Pride. And it's a very different scenario where you have then, not now, police and fire and all the other agencies that we wouldn't even dream of supporting our efforts back home because they're the ones that are persecuting us. So it's a very different thing, I think, to come from, the I don't want to use developing world, but the other other worlds to Canada and to experience Pride in those two contexts. It's mind-blowing. And I'm really proud to say that I have marched in quite a few prides, Kingston Pride, Toronto Pride, Capital Pride. They all have their uniqueness about them. And the one thing I love is the fact that in Canada we can express ourselves in this way, but we can't rest on our laurels because we can see those rights are being taken back now.
All right, Callie, I am curious. as Sherry was talking about, Ontario being sort of this, trailblazer and stuff, very different probably experiences in terms of your first Pride. I am just curious, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, my first Pride was Toronto Pride. I couldn't even put a date on it now, but it's got to be landing somewhere in the 2012s or 2013, so about 13 years or so ago. I was pretty doe-eyed at that time in my life. I had just come out, had my first girlfriend, had talked to my family about my lifestyle choices and all of those complicated conversations. And I think that, what I can say that first Pride experience offered me was a lot of confirmation that I was on the right path. It was also the first time I'd seen a drag performer and had never even heard of such a thing before, right? And now here I am with a list of 150 performers I hire every year.
Derek?
So my first experience actually is outside Ontario, Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, where I'm from. And I would have been 16 years old, and I was in drag on a float with my fellow Youth Can Do drama group. And my mom was there with my grandma, and it was incredible. PEI in Charlottetown have an incredible Pride Festival and great parade and a great history there. And then here would be Windsor, Essex. When I moved here 10 years ago, 2017 would have been my first Pride Festival, and it's incredible. We had it downtown then, and right on to the festival square overlooking the Detroit River and seeing Detroit right across. A lot of hot pavement though, and they've moved it to Lansbury Park since then, and I live for this. It's all down Ottawa Street, and all these businesses come out and support, and we land in a park for 3 days, and you can sit in the shade, you can listen to entertainers, you can visit vendors. I live there for 3 days basically. I go home to sleep, but I do come back the next day and I stay all day, and I'm just so proud it's grown. And similar to what Callie had said, here in Windsor, Essex, what we just had announced was this year there is more funding from organizations and kind of corporate sponsors locally than there is in the years past. It's grown, as well as attendance. And so there's struggles still, and I can speak to that, but we also have so many allies and progressive supporters in Windsor, Essex in particular. And we're seeing that community support continue, and I'm very proud to be able to say that and share that, in face of what is a lot of challenges and struggle.
All right. Callie, as we mentioned, Pride hasn't always been celebratory. I want to talk to you about some of the darker parts of history. Let's talk about the LGBT purge. What exactly is that? And walk us through why that was an important part of our history.
Yeah, absolutely. The LGBT purge is a time period in Canada that is kind of captured from 1950 to 1990, where civil servants, members of the RCMP, and folks in the military were removed, demoted, or taken off upward trajectories at their workplaces because they were thought to be a threat to the Canadian government and privacy, and all of this kind of fear around privacy and national security really came out of the Red Scare, the fear of communism, and that of course was learned in some ways too from the American context and our neighbors to the south. So there's a lot of similarities if you've heard of the Lavender Scare in the United States that were manifesting between the 50s and the 90s in Canada, and yeah, now we call that time as the purge because people were being purged out of their places of work in Canadian government. So we did see an apology for this practice, which was I'll mention too, quite intensive. People were followed, they were surveilled, they were made to report on the activities of their friends and confidants. In order to maybe save their own position, you had to report on others' activities outside of the workplace. So there was a lot of distrust, a lot of, kind of quiet, secretive conversations about, what it meant to be gay and be at work during that time. So as I was saying, we did see an apology from Prime Minister Trudeau in 2017, directly, citing these kinds of trials and tribulations. And I think that the other kind of thing I'll point out about all of this is that, Michelle Douglas, as an individual is often seen as the case that really set the precedent for the end of the purge and why it ended. So yeah, just as a final note, Michelle was kind of, as people say, the last to be purged. But the important thing to note is that she did, take it to court and say this is not right. And there was a decision by the federal court in her favor saying, her being removed from her position is actually not aligned with human rights protections in Canada, which was a very monumental moment in Canadian history and to really, cap off this period of purging.
Derek, I do want to talk about another stain in Ontario's history, bathhouse rates of 1981. Talk to us about this moment and sort of the aftermath. I think a lot of people think that that this was kind of centered in sort of the urban areas, but from what I understand, there are some connections to other parts of this province as well.
To Windsor as well, yeah. I will just say very quickly that if anyone wants to learn more about the Purge, the Canadian Human Rights Museum just put out this new exhibition, and Walter Cassie, who's a local historian here in Windsor, was in a role to help build that. It's called Love in a Dangerous Time. And if you can see the exhibition at the Canadian Human Rights Museum, you can, or online. They have some incredible education materials and teacher guides and a lot of information there that is a lot pulled from the archives, which another great resource to learn more. But just to say, here in Windsor, Essex, so we did have the Edna bathhouse was raided. There was a few bathhouses that have been raided. There's a lot of police repression in this area. We did have quite a big scene because of just the population and what is an urban center, but also because of Detroit. Right, in the crossover, people being able to have a lot more anonymity coming here. And before I moved here and before 9/11, really, the flow of people was really just like fish in water in some ways. There was much more ease to be able to cross and to be a part of that community as well as to be a part of this community. And so because of that, we did have a lot more here that then was also repressed and state interaction, right, to shut down those places of community gathering and to close out those opportunities to be with each other.
Sherry, what was it like to be, we're kind of going through history there, but you were living it.
I was living it, and just because of Maurice's activism, which I've seen firsthand over the years, I just wanted to mention that. But sadly, a number of sponsors have pulled out of Toronto Pride, particularly big multinationals. And so when I said that the first Pride was both celebration and demonstration, I think that one of the things that we might ask, just suggesting, of our big corporate sponsors is that they fly pride flags here and that they're very out in their support here. That's great. And I think we should love that. But what are they doing in other countries? We do have Canadian multinationals that operate, for example, in Jamaica and other places where it's illegal. Are they showing pride there? Are they flying the flags there? Are they, and down there, they have way more influence too because of their money on governments. So again, this is not just me speaking here. This is a general feeling, I think, among, Pride and Pride organizers as well as Pride, participants, is that maybe we should be hoping or expecting more from those who march with us. The other, 363 whatever days of the year, as well as on the day. So celebrate, celebration, demonstration. Do something with it.
All
Action.
Right. Great point. I do want to bring Maurice back into the conversation because I do want to talk about something that Sherry had mentioned. It's been 20 years since same-sex marriage was legalized in Canada. And of course, because we talked about Ontario, 22 years in Ontario. It seems like a long time ago, but as we know, other countries are still struggling to keep that up. How has the conversation around same-sex marriage changed over the years, Maurice?
Oh boy. The reality is that same-sex marriage galvanized the fundamentalists to challenge LGBT human rights, even more so than HIV. I was shocked because I've seen both the influx of fundamentalists when HIV was killing people, and they were using that as a justification to ban LGBT human rights. Then marriage equality, and it's just redoubled their efforts because they hate love. That's the bottom line. They hate love, and they are so vehement now that they're in Jamaica, for example, they've entrenched a ban in our constitution on any form of same-gender relationship, not even domestic partnerships or anything. And that's directly related to a Canadian who went to Jamaica to argue that they shouldn't adopt the loose human rights charter that we have in Canada in Jamaica because it would lead to the horrors of gay marriage. And, this is the influence that these fundamentalists, not only in the States, also in Canada, are having around the world. They're going all over, Tanzania, you name it, to say we cannot allow any form of same-gender relationships to be recognized. No, not even domestic partnerships, because it's going to lead to marriage equality. And that's going to lead to things which we have yet to see happen. But in their mind, the corruption of children, all of that. So it's great that we've had it in Canada. It's not progressing in other parts of the world. It's actually being used as a hammer or a sledgehammer to prevent the growth of any form of human rights for LGBT people.
All right, I want to show a clip from the agenda from 2011. This is with former Premier of Ontario, Kathleen Wynne. Have a listen.
The moms in that family shouldn't have to go into the school and read the riot act to the principal and say, okay, my kid's coming to your school, there are two mothers, if she's ever harassed, you're going to hear from me. She shouldn't have to do that. Right now, she may still have to do that. In the province, she may still have to go into the principal and say, look, this is the situation. You need to let the teachers know. But 4-year-old kids,
how often is that happening, though?
It's happening.
All right, Sherry, I'm coming to you. Are we still at a point in time where anything other than the nuclear family still has to be explained?
Well, and nice to see Kathleen. I consider her a friend now. We worked across the aisle on bills together. Just to say, I was the keynote for the AGM of Ontario English Catholic teachers, almost 1,000 teachers in that room. They all applauded. I wore my collar. I do a slide of 50 years of queer activism, now 54. But anyway, so I think it's really, really important that we keep, often it's the boards, for the Catholic teachers, often it's the bishops and the boards, but for all of our teachers who are supportive and inclusive, and most of the teachers' unions, I'd say all of the teachers' unions are really, we need to support those that support us in the schools, as well as our children, of course. But those teachers that are on the front lines, particularly in, Alberta, Saskatchewan, where they're being asked to do, I think, make terrible moves in terms of the children's safety, don't rat them out. Stand up for your children, be there. And I've spoken in schools where, and remember, we all share, people of the book, Muslims, Jews, Christians, we all share the same passages. Like, it's really important so that the kids have, I call it spiritual armor, but the teachers have it too, so that they don't get sidelined by using religion as you heard Maurice talking about, as a weapon. That is not in any of our scripture, in any of the world religions. I can argue that another show. But I mean, the reality is, we need to support our teachers in supporting our children, and we need to support our children. And that's going to be ongoing. It's going to be always. It's always been always. But now, again, know your rights. The law's on your side, at least here.
All right, Derek, I want to obviously get your take on this with your involvement in the Windsor school system, but also your proximity to another country that is having some pretty intense conversations that, we may say that, that border protects us, but unfortunately, conversations are coming north of the border on it.
Yeah, and we're probably one of the most American of Canadian cities, right? Mm-hmm. Being and same with Sarnia and some of these other border towns. But just to say that I do think, to share what Sherry DeNova just said, absolutely, we need to support our champions and champion our champions. And we have a very good relationship with our local Greater Essex County District School Board. And we have a decent relationship with our other school boards as well, the Catholic and French Catholic. And we've gotten to do PD days and be involved in education efforts. And we have Run for Rocky that does amazing fundraising, support the GSAs in our region and our community organizations. And that relationship with really encouraging those teachers and giving them boxes of supplies and really trying to bolster their spirits and keep morale high. That's one of the major reasons I do the drag shows as fundraisers, is keep morale high, keep the doors open, and also talk about what are the issues affecting us, and to really, engage in a lot of advocacy with our local politicians. But just to say, the influence is felt, it's not only that we talk in Fahrenheit here, it is also that a lot of those values a lot of that stigma, a lot of that bias is here. There's a lot of extremism. There's a lot of religious fanaticism, particularly in our county areas. And so it's an issue that we're currently working with, right? Like I was walking down the street the other day and, slurs were yelled at me as I'm just walking with my pink shiny cowboy boots. And that's the danger of right now. There's so much tension and people are very close, I think, to engaging in further violence, right? And I agree exactly what Sherry said about keeping our kids safe, because I support teens and some of them are quite young, just coming of age into teenagehood, and they know themselves. They're figuring it out at least. Like they have a sense, and getting to see, because I have like 30 to 40 of them hanging out on Wednesday nights, the way that they gather and the sense of self that emerges. And a lot of these kids are isolated in their schools. They're the only queer kid they know in their school who's open, and they're being bullied every day. And the teachers and administrators are not doing enough to protect them. And that's the fear that I have, is that right now we're in a moment where we could very quickly lose a lot of gains. And certainly the gains we have are not culturally embedded within our localized culture of relationships.
I want to go back down memory lane and look at a clip from 2013 where author Andrew Solomon talks about the move from tolerance to acceptance. Have a listen.
I see that the experience of gay people is so radically different now from what it used to be. I'm involved with the Gay and Lesbian Studies program at Yale, where I studied. The person who founded the program is Larry Kramer, leading gay activist, now in his 70s. When he talks about what it was like to be gay at Yale in the 1950s, I listen to him and I think, I can't imagine how anyone could have survived that. And I'm so grateful that I was gay at Yale in the 1980s. But then I look at the students who are there now and I see the experience they're having as they imagine marriage and family and stability and wide acceptance by their families and by everyone else around them. And I'm deeply jealous of the experience they have. And my hope is that when they come back, when they're approaching 50, they'll have the same feeling of jealousy for the next generation.
A beautiful clip there. Maurice, over a decade later, is Andrew right?
So, personal story. My son came out to me at 19. Oh. He had not had the courage to tell me. He had been kept away from me for years because family dynamics, etc., etc. Anyway, and I was so happy that, one, he came out to me in Canada, where he's now a permanent resident, working on his citizenship very slowly, but anyway. But I'm happy that he's here because, like the speaker one just said, I'm jealous. I'm jealous that he doesn't have to endure half the, pardon my French, shite that I had to endure growing up in Jamaica. He shows me way too many revealing photos of himself at raves, and I'm telling him, don't do it anymore, can't take it. But he goes to raves, he's going to all the pride parades. He's having the best time he can possibly have. Me, my experience of pride, as I said, was secrecy. There was only a glimmer of hope when we would be able to go out on the street briefly. Him, oh no, there's very little left to the imagination. Both me and his mother are worried about that. But anyway, the point is, I am so jealous, but at the same time, so happy, so proud. And that's what gives me the energy to keep working for liberation here and there, because we are gays of a certain age. You young people are lucky, but us gays of a certain age, we have to keep the fight going so that our legacy is maintained. Because as we've seen in the States, it is not, and as a lawyer, I'm sad to say, it is not etched in stone. No human rights is permanent. You have to fight to keep it every single day.
Callie, I want to get your take as someone who is younger. What just that clip, but also what Maurice had to say.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, publicly a view that Pride is a celebration. But, to kind of go back to the driving question of the show, is Pride still a protest? Like, certainly advocacy is still a major part of our festival. We try not to be too downtrodden all the time. So we do say, this 9-day period is our time to celebrate our joy and celebrate all of the hard work that we've done throughout the year. All of that advocacy that, Maurice and Sherry talks about, that we see evidenced in, the black and white photos. We are, and, sharing the legacy of that activism, that's certainly something that's being taken up by the younger generation, if I can put myself into that category. without too much offense here, yeah, definitely work that's being taken up and is being held with very much care and sensitivity to the very hard work that's come before us. So certainly I feel Pride is a place to celebrate all of this advocacy, but also a place to plan for future advocacy.
All right, I've only got 30 seconds left, but I do want to come to Derek and Sherry. Derek, I'm going to come to you first. What changes should be made today to make sure the conversation a decade from now is where you expect it to be?
I think if there's a answer to the call from the Enchante Network to make sure there's funding available for organizations across the country that serve our community, to have dedicated funding to ensure that they don't disappear. We've lost a few organizations already in the last 6 months to a year, and I'm certainly in a precarious situation with Trans Wellness Ontario and our, local festivals. So it's really wanting to make sure that we have the support we need to exist. We'll always exist is our current funding campaign. We'll always exist. Make sure our Trans Wellness still exists as well.
All right, Sherry, you get the last one.
10th anniversary of banning conversion therapy was my bill, first in Canada again, based on the stories of survivors. It's not being enforced. It's still happening. Our children are still being subjected to it. It just calls something different. We have to enforce our laws. There are laws here, and we have to require of those people that participate in Pride that those laws are extended to everywhere. And it's easy to be brave when you're surrounded by 1 million people in a Pride parade. It's harder for people like Maurice and others who have to deal with other countries. We need to make Pride international, and we need to require of our multinationals that they do that. So, yeah, let's all about the children. Keep our children safe.
All right, we're going to leave it there. I would like to mention that our documentary, Parade, Queer Acts of Love and Resistance, will premiere June 22nd at 9 p.m. on TVO and on our website, tvo.org, and our YouTube channel. I want to thank you all so much. Callie, Maurice, Derek, Sherry, thank you so much for joining us and for your insights and your stories and your inspiration and for the work that you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ontario's Minister of Energy and Mines, Stephen Lecce, oversees portfolios the government says will drive economic growth in the province in the years ahead. And he's got some big jobs ahead of him. His office is laying the groundwork to meet what experts say will be a 75% increase in electricity demand by the year 2050. But the plan is not without controversy. For a look at how he's managing those policies and others, we welcome back to the program Stephen Lecce, who's also the PC MPP for King Vaughan. And it's good to see you in that chair again.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Thanks for coming in. All right, let's start simple here. Last week, the government released what it's calling the Integrated Energy Plan, kind of a roadmap for the next 25 years.
Right.
What's the purpose of the document?
It's the first time in any subnational history to lay out a 25-year roadmap for energy security. We need to add 4.5 cities of Toronto to the grid, 75% by 2050. Massive undertaking. But unlike jurisdictions east and west and south, we have a long-term plan for economic growth and competitiveness. So what does that mean for you, everyday families watching? It means we're going to have affordable power because we're planning ahead with a 25-year horizon. Nuclear expansion, hydroelectric expansion, all the above, transmission expansions, the largest energy conservation program in the history of Canada. These are the foundations by which we unlock one strong Canadian economy. As you know, without power, we don't have economic growth. So this is laying the foundation for our kids and grandkids. And I think that intergenerational lens is something often missing from government, where politicians are seeking short-term electoral wins. We're not going to get a win the next election on this. This is for our kids. This is for our grandkids.
Speaking of missing, I think I looked at all 152 pages of the document and don't think I saw a dollar sign. How much is all this going to cost?
Well, the Independent Electricity Systems Operator estimates, based on the needs for transmission expansions and for generation expansions, it could be upwards of $300 to $400 billion. You are right to note that this is not an insignificant undertaking. It becomes more expensive, more prohibitive. We have reliability challenges if we don't plan ahead. This is the best case scenario because we're starting today with a 25-year horizon. Too often politicians, in my estimation, look to the short-term cycle. The 25-year horizon enables us to grow our economy from critical minerals to manufacturing to obviously to expanding our generation. And the nuclear is the anchor of our economic solution. When we're expanding Darlington, when we're refurbishing Pickering and we're adding Bruce C. Together, we're talking about 16,000 additional megawatts of nuclear power. That's like power for 60 million people.
How do you not look at a potential spend of $300 to $400 billion and absolutely not freak out?
It is a lot. The cost of inaction means that that number increases. The quantum could increase by 20, 30, 50, 75%. There are jurisdictions around us that are paying massive premiums because they don't have that proactive lens to public policy. They haven't thought about tomorrow. They're scrambling to get power for today, let alone for future growth. We are in an envious position. The Premier really has an ambitious plan for growth. And really, this is part of the nation-building vision that I think many premiers and the Prime Minister at all levels of government are talking about. I mean, nation building fundamentally is setting up the foundations for long-term growth. You need power. We want it to be clean, reliable, and affordable.
Let me pick up on that because the electricity supply mix in the province of Ontario is a really interesting thing. Presumably, the last several governments, which have invested a lot of money to green up the grid, prefer renewables as opposed. Well, we got rid of coal back in 2000 and whatever the heck it was, 2007, or at least that's when the promise was made. I want to, Sheldon, bring this chart up here because it looks like, as we consider in the future the projected future electricity supply mix, it looks like we're going to be using an increasing amount. Just for those listening on podcast, we got a lot of bar graphs here. The bottom line is we're going to be using a lot more natural gas going forward. And while natural gas is obviously cleaner than coal, it's not as green as renewables or as nuclear or as hydroelectric. So why is there less emphasis on renewables going forward, especially in the mid-2040s?
Well, first of all, what that graph demonstrates to you is that under this integrated energy plan, this long-term plan for growth, we actually get down to 99+% of our grid by year 2050 is non-emitting. Think of what an achievement that is without increasing taxes, a carbon tax or a regulation or a policy that removes options for consumers in the type of cars they're driving, for example. I mean, we achieve net zero
25 years from now.
By year 2050, which is a huge achievement. And between now and then, our grid will become cleaner and greener because the percentage of non-emitting nuclear power and hydropower is increasing. Today, nuclear is 50% of our baseload. We're going to get to 75% under our plan. That's non-emitting power. That is clean energy in addition to the expansion of hydroelectric. Now, you speak about renewables. We've taken a position, unlike the former Liberals, of not just romanticizing one resource at the exclusion of others. I mean, I believe all resources need to compete. We believe in an all-the-above approach. What that fundamentally means is we're not going to be in the business of sole sourcing winners and losers, which the former Liberals did.
But you're using more natural gas than they would have thought it was a good idea to do.
We're using, in this case, the lowest cost option to keep bills down because under the former Liberals, they increased by 400%. I mean, $1,000 more per month.
Because they renewed the grid.
There's no virtue in sending families or fixed income pensioners into energy poverty. Like, honestly, that was the effect of their policy. They may have felt good about it. The impact on the ground for everyday people was spending much more for energy, where it became some of the most expensive hydro rates on the continent. That's obviously not a good thing in the abstract. Now, I agree with you. We want a cleaner, greener grid. We could achieve that by maintaining the option of natural gas within the grid. But over time, it's decreased and dwarfed by the amount of non-emitting hydro and nuclear, which this government is heavily investing in. So you can grow your economy and reduce emissions. We already have one of the cleanest grids in the industrialized world. This plan, under our Premier's leadership, gets us to the cleanest, like 99+%, because we're investing in Canadian tech, nuclear, and hydroelectric.
I hear what you're saying, but I know how old you are, and you will be a senior citizen when all that happens. It's a long time to wait, don't you think?
Well, I think it's a sensible plan that gets us to net zero without imposing higher taxes. And I think most Canadians, most Ontarians, want energy to be reliable and abundant. We actually tested this concept of phasing out natural gas as proposed by the federal Liberals. You may recall the clean electricity regulations. The provincial Liberals had an echo of this policy. The IESO objectively analyzed
the Independent Electricity System Operator.
Thank you, sir.
Acronym free zone.
I know. I hate acronyms. The Independent System Operator did an analysis, and they concluded a phase out of this, as proposed by the federal Liberals and provincial Liberals, will lead to system reliability issues, brownouts, blackouts, and increase of prices.
We can't have that, obviously.
Well, no. I mean, look, in the abstract, they may feel good about their position, but the implementation, the impact on the ground is higher rates and reduced reliability. In no sensible government would put that at risk. Natural gas, to be clear, is used as an insurance policy in the province. It's not used for baseload power. It's fired up on the hottest days
up when you need
when we just need that differential. It represents roughly and historically less than 10% of the mix. We are on track for the cleanest, greenest grid in the industrialized world, which is attracting investment to our province. We're proud of that. We're also proud that we're keeping rates low and we're not increasing taxes. I think there's virtue there to make sure energy is affordable when we're dealing with so many economic challenges.
I want to talk about elbows up because your government, I think it's fair to say, got reelected on a promise to protect Ontario from whatever ravages Donald Trump had in mind, and he has a lot in mind.
Yeah.
So as a result, the LCBO took all the American-made booze off our shelves, canceled one of Elon Musk's Starlink contracts. Most of the natural gas, I'm told, for the new and existing power plants for the province is going to be sourced from the United States. Sheldon, chart if you would, because we want to show, and again, for people listening on podcast, this is essentially a chart that shows we're going to be importing from the United States electricity generation sources in a large measure. And I guess I'm wondering what happened to elbows up when we could get some of this stuff presumably from Western Canada and not have to buy it from them.
Yeah, I think it's actually a really important question because when the question is framed for example, in Quebec, do you support displacing Donald Trump's natural gas with a Canadian alternative or a Quebec-sourced natural gas alternative? 6 in 10 Quebecers say, yes, we're supportive of a pipeline, which you will know, and most of your viewers will know. That is a radical change from when the Energy East policy, when I worked for Prime Minister Harper, where it was totally opposed by Quebec, effectively vetoed. So the world has changed. The economics have changed. Geopolitics have changed.
But you got to put Trump's name in that question, or else you might get a bit of a different response.
It certainly lifts the response.
It torques it a bit, yeah.
But the truth is that's who we're up against today. And to your question, the Integrated Energy Plan actually lays out the key principles, the guiding principles for Ontario's strong support for an east to west energy corridor. That includes east to west transmission grid. It includes east to west pipelines. I believe Ontario has always played in Confederation a unifying role. And I think we should not discount very authentic concerns of Western alienation. The West wants a fair deal.
All the more reason to buy electricity generation from them, no?
All the reason to support getting their commodities to Tidewater. I mean, we need a solution to this. We are landlocked. 80% of our resources of our exports are going to one customer who now has a lot of leverage over us, too much, I would submit, and the Premier would agree. So what it means is we got to build a pipeline east to west. We're offering, obviously, support for that pipeline. One of our foundations and principles is we want to get Canadian steel manufacturers, pipe fitters to build it. We also make clear our interest in a deep sea port in the James Bay to help get our ore or other products, could be liquefied natural gas, to new markets. The vision of energy superpower that governments are speaking about is achieved by ending the landlocking of our resources. And this is a fundamental imperative for our economy and for our national security. I think now more than ever, the federal government is right to push forward on this vision. And I think there is social acceptability out there. We talked about the phrasing of the question, but generally speaking, post-Trump, Canadians want a solution. We want to be energy independent. We want it to be affordable. And yes, I would like to displace American or even more so, despotic forms of energy. We got Venezuelan petroleum. We've got resources coming from Russia. This just seems nonsensical and offensive. In the energy portfolio, we still do a lot of procurement. And one of the solutions in the Integrated Energy Plan is to phase out and remove the overwhelming dominance of China within the supply chain in energy. 60% of solar, 80% of wind is built in China. So I want to end the financing of regimes and governments that are undermining our way of life indiscriminately.
Does that include the United States?
In the United States, it does actually include a phase out of dependence from the U.S. We're actually giving more points to Canadian business. I would not suggest they're an authoritarian regime. I would submit in this tariff war, we're standing up for Canada by saying we want to buy more Canadian. And we're actually giving incentives in our procurement system to more points if you are a local Canadian supplier.
Then tell me this, how come, and I know the small modular reactors are the new, they're the flavor of the month for nuclear generation now.
Yeah.
And I guess a large chunk of the project is Canadian made, but there is US-based technology from GE and Hitachi, which will go into this. And, this government, again, protect Ontario, elbows up. why not cancel the American involvement in this and go with Rolls-Royce, which is British, or maybe go with whatever they used to call it CANDO. Now it's something else. What do they call it now?
Yeah, it is CANDO.
Atkins-Realis.
Atkins-Realis.
yeah.
Well, first of all, there isn't a Canadian alternative of a grid-scale commercial SMR that is this viable.
So we got to go with the American model.
We've got to go with the most efficacious, proven technology. This is the first of its kind in Canada. To suggest this isn't a Canadian value add, I'm not saying you're saying this, but for those that may have this curiosity, the Conference Board of Canada did a study on the net benefits to Canada's economy. $36 billion in net gain, 20,000 Canadian construction jobs, 3,500 permanent jobs will be created here. Because OPG, first of its kind, we are the first country in the G7 to build an SMR. And unlike the British alternative, like you mentioned, the tech they're providing is going to be in service 4 to 6 years after us. Like our SMR, a small modular reactor, 300 megawatts of dispatchable stackable power, is going to be connected to the grid in year 2029, 2030. The first in the G7, like we just hosted the G7. It's pretty neat that of all those industrial economies, here in Ontario, we are leading the world and we're exporting it. And we in Ontario own part of the IP when we sell them. Every time we sell them in Poland, like for example, where I was there with Rudy Kazeto a few months ago, the Polish, the Estonians, the Czech Republic, the United States, the largest public utility in America, TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, signed on to build this SMR. We have market penetration because we have a very reputable technology partner.
We have, unless I missed it, I don't know that we've ever done large-scale nuclear construction of power generation that comes in on time or on budget. And this is a very brand new technology.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can't sit here and tell me that you know it's going to be on time and on budget by 2029, can you?
Well, I think what we can do is we can ensure discipline and of the schedule and on the budget, because OPG, who is leading this project, to be fair to them, like your assumption is fair writ large, right? Most of these projects haven't been done well on time and budget, but that's not Ontario's, and that's certainly not OPG's historic experience. Look, since I became minister, I had to put our Darlington, refurbish this large-scale nuclear reactor, roughly 4,000 megawatts of clean power, an amazing nuclear reactor. Pickering, 2,000 megawatts of power. The Liberals want to close it. I announced the life extension. In both cases, in Darlington, it is being done on time and ahead of schedule.
That is, but I remember the days when Bill Davis's government said, oh, it'll only cost $3 billion to do, and the bill came in at $16 billion.
Yeah, right? Listen, there are lessons learned from the past governments.
I hope so. You think there are?
Well, I think they're being applied, Steve, because in this case, look at the record of every large-scale refurbishment of some of the largest reactors on Earth, on time, on budget, and often ahead of schedule. 180 days. When we put Unit 1 at Darlington, roughly 1,000 megawatts of power, 900 megawatts of power, great example of Canadian leadership in the world. We were the only country amongst the UK, the US, the French, all these large military powers to say we put our refurbishment back online ahead of schedule and under budget. So I hear you. I understand the challenge.
I'm just curious, you know.
No, look, I'm a taxpayer too, but I'm just saying to you, it's pretty incredible that here in Ontario, we can boast with confidence and a wonderful differentiator, a competitive advantage around the world, that we're doing it on time, we're doing it on budget. I'm talking about the large scale. So those lessons will be applied to everything we do. Of course, first of its kind technology always comes with risk and opportunity. But the fact that we're looking at a $36 billion gain, export opportunities, our supply chain, the Canadian Ontario supply chain, $500 million of commitments to build out the SMRs of the world. So we're now at the center of this export. I think that's pretty neat. And I mean, I think that's pretty exciting when it comes to Canada being at the center of the clean energy economy of the future. And many countries are turning back to nuclear, including those that have turned away from it, because it's the only way to create that baseload, reliable, affordable power over the course of, in this case, that's a 65-year asset of continuous power. And so we looked at the alternatives. We actually looked at renewables. We actually put it in the press release, which is a bit of an unusual tactic, Steve, because I wanted people to understand, like, the land cost for an SMR is the size, it's a footprint of a community center. It's very small, very modern. They don't look like sort of the Darlingtons, if you will, different tech. You look at a solar alternative or wind. And by the way, again, I'm technologically agnostic. We support those resources too. But we looked at those alternatives because we knew someone would say, but why not choose solar? Of course, made in China solar, you know, the great violator of human rights and environmental labor standards.
Baseload's an issue with that.
and it is an issue because it's intermittent. But when you associate the land and the cost for the technology, and then you need the same size battery effectively. We looked at roughly land the equivalent to the size of the GTHA to get that type of, to your point, reliability. You have to build three times the volume to hit that type of reliable power source. So it's more expensive. The levelized cost is still higher than the first of its kind. So, we are confident, but we are very much committed to keeping that accountable and protecting the taxpayer.
Okay. We got about 5 minutes to go here, and I want to touch on the other part of your portfolio,
Sure.
because you are the energy minister, but you also have responsibility over mines. And one of the things your government has been criticized for lately is this thing, Bill 5, which would allow the government of Ontario essentially to, well, you've read some of the columns about it. There is a lot of concern that there is some running roughshod over people's rights as the attempt to build new infrastructure, nation-building projects, whatever you want to call it, is going forward. I was, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I was surprised to hear during the debates at Queen's Park that all the premiers have been meeting about these. The federal government has been meeting about this because they've got their own C5 that does kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
But there was no Indigenous representation at any of the tables where this stuff came up, and you want to build on their land. What's going on?
Well, I think, the basis for this legislation, certainly the schedule that I'm responsible for on accelerating mining. I just want to start with the problem we're trying to solve, just a level set. We have one of the slowest permitting regimes in the industrialized world. The OECD said we're the second slowest. In Canada, we are the 10th out of 10th, the last benchmark. This is not a benchmark you want to achieve. We are the worst when it comes to attracting mining investment. Last year, one of the two mines that opened, it took them 16 plus years.
Let me follow up on that, though, right away, because I don't know that you can get these mines open any faster. What is it, 15 years it takes right now? 15,
Can
whatever?
take upwards of that, yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure you're going to get them open any quicker if there are blockades on roads, if there are First Nations that aren't consulted. If they are not made a partner to what you are trying to do.
I
So
agree-
are
I
you cutting
agree.
off your nose to spite your face here?
No, I agree with that premise. My point is simply to say that the impetus behind this introduction of this bill, the first bill was to eliminate interprovincial trade barriers. The second bill was to accelerate responsible resource development because we're in a critical minerals race. To your point, though, I think actually you have a lot of alignment with our government when it comes to the reality on the ground. We know if we want to do big things, anything really, particularly when it comes to the lands, Indigenous lands, treaty lands, etc., we have to do it in partnership.
So why isn't that happening?
Well, in the Ministry of Energy and Mines, it is happening. Every transmission project we've approved in this province, we're talking about billion-dollar projects, Indigenous participation, 50-50 equity. Every single battery project and storage project, the 9 of the 11 so far, Indigenous participation. In this past budget, to help realize more ownership over those very projects, we added $3 billion for equity for Indigenous to buy in.
I did see
The
that,
federal
yes.
government has $5 billion. We're one province, a big province, but $3 billion. I think what it demonstrates is a commitment to ensure economic reconciliation. We have been, and we're going to continue to work with them.
In which case, why are they, I shouldn't say they, there are some Indigenous groups that are on side with what you're doing.
Sure.
There are some others that are saying, you know what? Well, you heard Solomon Makwa, the NDP MPP, the other day, I guess it was a week or two ago, saying, it's coming. The blockades are coming. Trouble is coming because you guys are not consulting as you are obliged to do because of a Supreme Court decision. What about it?
So I think the answer to anyone who's inquiring is the government of Ontario, like all governments in this country, constitutionally must discharge the duty to consult. That's not a choice, right? The law doesn't give you the right to override that. This bill that we brought forward does not expedite that. Like that is a moral and a legal duty of government to meaningfully consult.
And you will do that?
Well, yes, and the Supreme Court will require that. But the government, we don't need the court to tell us that.
Okay.
Like intuitively, Steve, we want to do this in partnership. And we want to build together because there's massive opportunity, particularly in the north. It's why we announced $500 million of funding for increasing critical mineral processing, so we end the ripping and shipping of resources.
Okay,
So that
I'm cutting you off here because we're down to our last minute here.
Okay.
The hockey season's over. You don't have to rag the puck so much anymore. But
No,
anyway,
it's an important note, though. We want to
I get you.
process
You're
in
very,
Canada.
you're very enthusiastic about this stuff. I get it. I'm going to ask you the question I asked Peter Bethlen-Falvey, the Minister of Finance, every budget day, which is, I make a six-figure salary, and so do you, and so does he. And for whatever reason, the province of Ontario is still subsidizing my electricity bill, your electricity bill, his electricity bill, the Premier's electricity bill, to the tune of nearly $7 billion taxpayer dollars a year. Why does that make sense?
Look, the reason why we put forth these energy subsidies in the first place is because hydro rates were so out of control because of really incompetent government of the former Liberals. I mean, they lost the 2018 election in part under Premier Wynne because of irresponsible actions on energy and hydro. They increased the highest 400%. Everyone paid the price. So the government used tax dollars to help reduce the rates, create some stability in the system.
Why not direct it against those who need the help? You don't need the help. I don't need the help.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a public policy question on how to do that, how to really narrowcast those supports. Is it based on the square footage of one home? Because a very wealthy person can live in an apartment downtown. I mean, there's an interesting, we've looked at options. I mean, certainly what I'd say to you is, I get your point. But in the meantime, we're going to keep energy rates.
says the same thing. He says, I get your point, but we're not changing the policy.
Intellectually, we get it.
Yeah.
I'm open to you or your viewers' recommendations on how to narrowcast. But what I'd say in the meantime is we want to keep energy rates affordable. That's a strength when it comes to attracting investment and creating 1 million jobs, which we've done under our Premier. And we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep ensuring energy is affordable, but with a commitment to phase out these subsidies over time.
Really?
Well, I think, as you will see...
I haven't seen that. It's only going up every year that I've seen.
We're trying to bring forth some reduction in that trajectory over time. We certainly want to keep energy affordable.
We shall see. I'm out of time. That's it. That's all.
Steve, thank you for nearly 20 years of good public service. We appreciate you. We're going to miss the agenda.
Well, you'll find something else to watch. It's okay.
I'll move on.
But you know what? We've enjoyed having you on these many years because you always come prepared, and you're very good at what you do. You're very tough to knock off your message. And many of us who watch politics for a living are quite intrigued to see what's going to happen to you in the years ahead. And that's all I'll say about that.
Thank you, sir. That's
Stephen Lecce, Minister of Energy and Mines and the MPP for King Vaughan. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you.
And that is the agenda for Thursday, June 19th, 2025. Tomorrow on the program, John Michael McGrath and yours truly will discuss Project Ontario, a manifesto calling on Doug Ford's government to be more fiscally conservative. Hope you'll join us for that. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.